Hey, what's going on, everyone, and welcome to episode 28 of the Alec Walt Show. I'm your host, Alec Walt, alongside another very special guest, and today we're going to talk about the Boston Bruins. Today was day one of free agency. The Bruins were extremely active, and here to talk about every move they made today was DJ Mitchell, the host of the Morningscape podcast, contributor for the Charging Buffalo, and a fantasy hockey host for the Mayo Media Network. DJ, welcome back, man. It's been a minute.
Yeah, I know. It's been a little over a week now since we last talked about the Bruins, and a lot has changed. Oh, my God, so much has changed. I mean, more than I knew about, more than I expected. I definitely did not see a couple of these moves coming, but some of them definitely could have been foreseen. So how are you feeling after a very busy free agency for many teams, but definitely Boston?
I'm feeling good. I mean, they added some pieces they needed. You know, I was complaining last week about how they're too small. They added some more physical players, and we're going to jump into all that, but where I want to start, DJ, is in net. Mm-hmm. Because the Bruins gave $20 million to a goalie, and his name wasn't Tuukka Rask. The duo next year is going to be Jeremy Swayman and Linus Ullmark, who played for your Buffalo Sabres. DJ, give us a little bit breakdown of the new goaltender who's going to play for Boston next year.
I don't understand how Buffalo couldn't get the deal done. They have literally no NHL goalies at all. And they have, with Jack Eichel still on the roster in Buffalo, they have, I believe it is, over $11 million to make it to the minimum cap requirement by the NHL. The minimum. The thing about Linus Ullmark is he was awesome for Buffalo. I mean, the team was terrible. He started off the year with above a .920 save percentage. The Sabres were, a middling team in the was it the Mass Mutual division or whatever that was called?
Something like that.
They were kind of like a couple games out from the final spot in the playoffs, and Ullmark goes down. Carter Hutton won one whopping game. They went on that 19 straight losses. It was 19 or 20, something ridiculous after he got injured. Ullmark, 27, Swedish goalie. He would actually be turning 28 on the 31st of July. I think it's relatively safe because I do think he has grown, and sort of the way his career trajectory has gone, it seems like this could be a guy that could continue to have success. He finished the year in Buffalo again with a .917 save percentage, which is definitely a bit above replacement level. And when you play in front of that defense and no scoring, it's kind of impressive to say the least. We have seen players of this nature have, they go from a really bad team where they did well to a really good team and not perform. I know that was talked about a bit on Free Agency Frenzy over on TSN. They're like, well, can he, continue to be good on a good team? I don't think there's that much of that narrative myself, but it's going to be interesting to see because Boston's a much, much better team. I wanted to get to Bob McKenzie's tweet about the decision by Boston because he seemed to have a little bit more insight on the deal. So, Boston signing Ullmark, and many people immediately are wondering about Tuukka Rask, right? I mean, he's a UFA right now. What's going on? So it sounds like Tuukka Rask is going to need 5 to 6 months to recover to be ready to play in the NHL again. They're not sure if Tuukka Rask is going to return to the NHL at all, but if so, they're leaving the door open for him. So it sounds like that there could be maybe a 1-year deal for Tuukka, and they could start him on the physically unable to perform list. Might end up happening is what it sounds like. They then have Jeremy Swayman, who's going to be backing up because they traded Dan Vladar. So it sounds like with Tuukka Rask, it's more of this is an insurance policy, and also he's almost definitely done after this year with these injuries, etc., and the family concerns, which kept him out during the 2019 playoffs. So that's kind of seemingly the situation, and they decided to jump. Everyone thought it was between Buffalo and Colorado, and Boston kind of swooped in the 11th hour and stole Linus Ullmark from conceivably both teams. So that would be kind of the overarching thing. Other than that, with Ullmark, I think you're getting a guy that can make the miraculous save, but at times look a little bit lost in position. That would be the best way to describe him, because if you look at his highlights, he will make Dominic Hasek level saves, and then all of a sudden you'll see a backdoor goal where it's where'd he go? So that's what you're kind of looking at. I think that Tuukka Rask also plays a bit of a similar style, going from the Finnish Tuukka Rask to the Swedish Linus Ullmark. Those guys over there in Scandinavia seem to always kind of play with a bit of an edge on them. But what do you think of the deal? I mean, $5 million per, like we talked about before, you don't want to pay too much for goalie. You could get yourself in a lot of trouble, but it seems like it's going to keep kind of the median average at around 2.5, which is pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, I like it. I wasn't expecting it at all. I mean, when you sent me that tweet earlier today that Ullmark was heading to Boston, I was a little bit confused, but Yeah, he's on the team. $5 million is a pretty reasonable rate. I mean, I mentioned it the last time we spoke. I think going into the season with two goaltenders, 23 or younger, thinking they're going to fill a full 82-game schedule and go into the postseason to be successful, I think you're crazy. Look, a young goal, everyone goes through ups and downs in an entire season. You want to make sure you have a veteran in-house. We'll see what happens with Tuukka Rask, but, I made it clear we needed to get another number one goalie here in Boston. Ullmark can do that. Swayman can also do that as well. I think that duo going into the season, is pretty awesome. And hey, the Bruins are a much better team than the Sabres. I think his situation in net's going to be a lot better. So, we'll see how he adjusts to his new time in Boston. But 4 years, $5 million per year with a Swayman on a cheap deal with them splitting time for the most part, I think it's a pretty good deal for the Bruins.
Yeah, definitely. And it's only 4 years. Like I said, he's turning 28. So it's not like you're going to be getting any of those years where you get concerned about a guy like like I mentioned with Ullmark, he's had some injury concerns, and I think that you're not going to be getting a guy that could end up having sort of that like nagging injury that ends up ending his career early, and then you're kind of burying his contract. So I overall think the term's really good. It's not going to crush you the $5 million cap hit. So I definitely like the deal. That's what I'm saying. I can't believe Buffalo couldn't offer that to him. They had to have offered that to him, and whether he took it or not is on him. I think we'll find out eventually, but it is just another you throw your hands up if you're a Sabres fan again and just say like, we just let this guy walk for nothing. I mean, I don't know. But moving forward, the Bruins, the one other thing I mentioned, they just signed Troy Grosnick, who's going to probably start the AHL. So if you're a fan of, is it Providence now, right?
Yeah, Providence. So it should be interesting to see how the Bruins are in net. Hopefully Tuukka Rask can come back after his hip surgery. But let's move on from goal to offense. Nick Foligno was a big signing. I know a lot of Bruins fans who were extremely disappointed when Richie wasn't coming back. The big physical winger on a team that's really small. Foligno still provides that punch, is better offensively. This is a great player to fit in on the third line for the Bruins.
Yeah, it is really funny. A lot of people were talking about last deadline. It was like, oh, can like Toronto get Hall or Foligno? If Hall and Foligno, these are the Bruins go out and get them both now. So they bring both that kind of the top guy, him and Palmieri in the mix there. But yeah, I think Nick Foligno. I think the number one thing that comes to mind is leadership. He was kind of always. It felt like he was going to go back to Columbus, which I think is why this was a little bit shocking to some people to see him kind of go to Boston. But the situation in Columbus, I think, ended up changing with some of the moves they had to make because seemingly no one wants to play in Columbus or Buffalo. But I think it's just a really good fit in that locker room. A guy that, came into Toronto. He only ended up playing 7 games in the regular season, had 4 points, but I think he has a bit more scoring than that in him. And then in the playoffs, it's a guy that you can definitely rely on to play some big minutes and clog up, and play defensively. And I think, like I mentioned before, that was kind of the concern with this Bruins team. I thought was a little bit of like bringing in a guy like Studnicki and others might not have that defensive caliber that you need. I think a full 200-foot player. So I think it's a really smart signing, and I was surprised that they got him that cheap. 2 years, 3.8 seems pretty solid for a former captain, former first-round pick who is only 33. Like he'll be 34 in the season. Yeah. But 2 years, like you're not, it's just it just seems like a really smart deal for him to make. And I don't think he's going to go out here and score 20 goals, but he could easily pick up, 10 to 15 and have normally more assists than that, maybe 20 assists. And everyone's looking at themselves like, how did we not think to do this? I don't think there's much of a downside to this deal at all, other than the 2-year deal. It's just so quick. Worst case scenario, they could, buy him out next year if it was absolutely a complete train wreck. But I just don't see that happening from a guy that kind of consistently has performed, a good pace.
So, DJ, Foligno is not the only new name offensively. The Bruins went after a lot of centers. Seems like they have 4 competing for these 2 spots. Who do you think's the center on the third line, and could you possibly see another former center moving to the wing?
And I'm telling you, a guy like Eric Haula really is an interesting pickup for me. I was always pretty high on him for his scoring upside. He kind of always had that innate ability to find the back of the net. He had that 30-goal season almost for Vegas when they got him out of the expansion draft. Kind of just fell off a cliff since then. Kind of got out of favor in that lineup there, went to Carolina and was producing at an okay rate. And it seemed like a really good signing last year by Nashville. Everyone was kind of talking about, like, could this be a resurgence or Haula, maybe a bigger role? I don't think it ever really got there. So I'm wondering if they see him more as a winger. I'm not really sure, if he's going to be able to pick it back up again to that pace. But I do think it's, again, a pretty low risk he has a scoring ability, and finding that offensive touch, that ability to put the puck in the back of the net, can be rare at times. So I don't think it's a bad signing by any means, but I just can't imagine him as your third line center being overly successful. But I think he mixes in between that and the wing, and maybe they have some other guys that can funnel in. And as we saw in the playoffs, I mean, having center play is so incredibly vital. And that's a big reason why a team like Montreal was able to get there, because they had 3 centers on the middle that could all funnel in, like a guy like Deneau last year for Montreal is kind of by comparison. It's like, do we have a guy that can play that defensive game and get the job done? I'm not sure if it's Haula. That's kind of what I'm getting at here. I think unless if he changes his game a bit, it could happen. I think Nosek is definitely your fourth line guy. Seems to fit that role pretty perfectly. I think Foligno, as I mentioned, I think he'll stick at center and kind of play that third spot. And he could be on the wing as well, but I think that he can kind of bounce between the two. I think that's kind of the 1-2, Haula and Foligno. And then Nosek will fit in on the fourth line.
What about Coyle?
I see him more as a winger personally. I mean, it's hard to know for sure. I think it'll be those kind of 3, and it's kind of like, who's your best draw man, and who's the best at actually funneling through the middle and playing that defensive game, because I think that's what they want here is a shutdown line. All of them have some defensive ability in my estimation. I'm not sure if any of them push the needle way above the rest. But I think it's whatever one's playing the best defensively down the middle is who's going to get that spot. Because I think it's a copycat league in the NHL. And I really think that the way Boston looks at themselves is as a much better team than Montreal that just lost in the Stanley Cup Finals. They have a much better top 6 than Montreal. I think you could argue goaltending would be the one area that Montreal might have been beaten, even though I'm a little bit lower on Carey Price than most. So I think what their angle is we have 3 guys that have some defensive pedigree. Which one of them can funnel through the middle the best to shut down the Braden Point line, to shut down the Austin Matthews line, like we saw with, the Deneau line in many capacities, and then try to get that top 6 to score and get it done in the playoffs. So I don't know which one it is specifically that'll be in the middle, but I think that Coyle, Haula, Foligno line makes a lot of sense to me to kind of fit that role for the Bruins.
Nice. We already mentioned Nosek on the fourth line in the middle. There are some other options here. Yes, I know there's a specific winger on that third line I haven't mentioned yet, and we'll get to very shortly. I don't really think Jake DeBrusk fits the way the Bruins want to play on that fourth line. So with Nosek in the middle, between those 3 other guys, who finishes their bottom 6?
Yeah, so the fourth line in Boston, I think it's definitely going to be a competitive battle all season long. There's some prospects that we mentioned on the last show that'll try to funnel in. We have Lazar, Frederick, Wagner, and Nosek all going to be fighting for roles. It could be something that is a little bit matchup dependent, what they end up doing with each game, but I think it's going to be, none of these guys are going to play a full 82 games. And I think in this league, you can't really do that anymore, where you can just rely on 4 lines to roll all season long. And definitely with injuries, etc. This will be the first year back at 82 in 2 seasons. It's something that I think is going to help the Bruins throughout the entire season to stay on edge. You're fighting for a playoff spot now. There's no other way to put it. Montreal was in the Stanley Cup last year, and most people aren't even really considering them as a playoff team, with Toronto, Tampa, and Florida looking a lot better, getting Reinhart in the mix. It's going to be an absolute dogfight in that division for the top 3 spots. And then you're fighting for a while. I think you need to have depth and make sure that you're not going to leave yourself out to dry with a couple fourth and third liners going down. So I definitely think that a lot of their signings were to make sure that those roles were fit. And that is just the forwards. We haven't even touched on the defense yet, which they made a number of moves on as well.
Yeah, well, one player we haven't talked about, or I gave a quick mention to, is it seems like Jake DeBrusk's role on this team has completely disappeared. So what's going to happen with Jake DeBrusk?
So I don't think they're going to need to move him for nothing, like we just saw with a Will Butcher or all the trades Arizona made, taking on some dead cap more or less. So even though his contract isn't favorable with his recent production, I think that they'll be able to find a partner that's willing to give him a chance. He's 24 years old. Did he have? I think he had just under 30 goals. I think he had 29 goal season. So I do think that someone will make a move on him. I think, if I'm making any sort of an educated guess, I think they're looking for another defender. I think they have a really nice 5 to 6 potentially, but I think you want one more guy in the mix there. And I think they're going to try to look for someone around the same age for a little bit less cap that they feel could step in like a Mike Riley last year and fill a role if needed. And maybe if they excel, they can find themselves, running on the third pairing or even the second pairing. So who that is going to be really, really hard to dictate. I would look at teams like Seattle and others of that nature, teams with cap space that can't, they can take that on, that are still trying to win. Maybe in the Pacific is the perfect division because every team could win that division. Maybe a Vancouver, et cetera. Like those are the teams I think they're going to make the push. Who has that right defender? Start to fill in that puzzle, and I think that's where we're going to end up with Jake DeBrusk.
So let's move on to that defense because they did make a few moves today. Let's talk about the man they brought back in Mike Riley. You seem to like him a little bit more than I do, but what do you think about him coming back 3 years, $3 million per season?
I think he's just a perfect pairing for either of the guys you have on the right in the top four. I mean, McAvoy and Carlo play a very good, very sound defensive game already, and that gives him the room on the left side to run the offense. I mean, you can't have a team full of Derek Forbarts, but you can't have a team full of Mike Rileys either. So I think that getting both of those guys on the left side is going to help because you need a guy that can break the puck out, that can move the puck through the zone, and can handle a second pairing or potentially first pairing if a guy like Grzelcyk goes down. So I think Mike Riley makes a lot of sense to bring back on a short term. As I mentioned, he was kind of like a very elite kind of feeling prospect coming out of college, out of Minnesota, and never lived up to the hype. And I think he's found a really good home here. And I think if you put him with a guy like McAvoy, especially, but maybe you don't want to, do that. We'll see what they end up doing. Or Carlo, you could really let him run wild and do what he does best. He's a guy that I think has, 25 assist upside on defense because he can move the puck on a string. You got to let that skill guy run, and you put him with a bigger guy like you mentioned, and it could work really well. On the other hand, a guy like Derek Forbort fills a completely different role. So if you want me to move right over to him.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so Derek Forbort is a guy that, knowing daily fantasy hockey like I do, you love to fill in on the cheap because he blocks a ton of shots. He's a big body defenseman, but he isn't the guy that's going to break the puck out of the zone. He isn't the guy that's going to go coast to coast and try to set up a play, but you definitely need that guy that's going to, move bodies out of the front of the net, let your goalie see the puck coming in, and also, have some sort of backbone on the backside to deliver a big hit when the game's going that way. So I'm a big fan of Forbort. I think that if you ask the analytic community, they're higher on Riley because he just has more metrics that are going to funnel into their analytic, silo and fit their role more. But Derek Forbort is still a very useful player. And I think that that's a signing you like a lot. Definitely, again, if Derek Forbort, when they said Bruins, I was like, it just feels like a Bruin again. And I think
they needed to get him. They were way too small. And I was saying this last show, they need to go after a defenseman with some size. Forbort, for those of you who've never heard of him, 6'4", 219. He's going to fit on that third line defense with Connor Clifton. I was a little bit nervous going into the day. We lost Jeremy Lauzon, who's a gritty defenseman, to the Kraken. You looked at their defense and you're like, pretty tiny. You see, you want to play some of these teams like Tampa in the playoffs. Islanders, you got to be more physical. You got to have guys who can punch back. And, Forbort's one of those guys who, if you punch at him, he's going to punch back.
If you have some time to rewatch the entire Edmonton-Winnipeg series, you would notice Derek Forbort. He was very out there making plays for them defensively against McDavid's and Draisaitl's. And he's a big reason they won the series. A ton of block shots in that series. A guy that definitely, I think, earned his contract in the playoffs more than anything else. For Winnipeg, he was a guy that when Winnipeg signed, it felt, at least to many people, that it was like seventh pairing guy, and he ended up playing 56 games for them and every game in the playoffs, coming off of a kind of very down year in Los Angeles on a terrible team. So I think he's a guy that wants to be on a winner. I think that was probably his biggest thing. He told his agent, I want to be on a team that can win, because I think that's where he thrives, in that kind of a locker room and in that intensity. So I'm a big fan of that signing for the Bruins in general, but again, not a guy that could just go anywhere. Like, he's got to go to a winner. And I think that it fits well in this division, that he can be the guy to rough up a Matthews a little bit.
Yeah. This is the craziest thing I saw about him. In 6 NHL seasons, he averages 20 minutes and 1 second of ice time. The Bruins got a very, very solid defenseman for the next 3 years. Again, he's going to be 29 entering next year. So that big body defenseman I was worried about them not having, they now have in Derek Forbort. DJ, before we let you go, is there anything else you could see the Bruins do this offseason to prepare for the 2021-2022 season?
I really think they accomplished all of their goals today, other than moving Jake DeBrusk, but I don't think they're in any rush to do that. free agency today was an absolute whirlwind. From noon to 6 o'clock, every player on the big boards was gone and moved on. And I do think there's a couple guys out there that are a little underknown that maybe get moved here or there. But I think the Bruins at this point are. I think that the best case scenario is that they move Brusque, they get a guy that's on a lower cap hit, and they maybe can find a way to boost their draft picks by taking on a guy that maybe not on the most favorable contract for 1 year, and that can fit a role for them. And I'm not sure who that is exactly, but a guy maybe $4 million or under that they feel could add value to their roster. The only other player that I don't think is signed yet is Corey Perry, that I think maybe a fit there, a guy that, if Montreal can't get it done, and it seems like they will, that might be looking for a team like Boston, just to, again, fit in that those bottom two lines, and what a valuable asset he was in the playoffs. Like, he's not going to score a million goals, but he's an unbelievably gifted power play.
Him and Foligno teammates.
Yeah, I think he could have it. Yeah, I know. Like, yeah, right. I again, like that just feels like a move they might try to make. Other than that, and also I just pulled it up while you were talking quickly. Forbert was sixth in the NHL in blocks per game last year. And I'm sure in his career, just about right up there. So again, like a guy that you will notice on the stat sheet and you will notice watching him every night. And I'm sure Linus Ullmark is happy to have him take a couple away from him from the points. So I think it's huge. And but overall with the Bruins, like there's no reason this team isn't a playoff team. It's just, can they be a top three, or are they going to be ended up having to face Tampa in the first round or something like that? Yeah, what I would dream of is that they finish in the second wildcard spot and they play Toronto in like first place. That would be like, that's what I think everyone's hoping for.
Yeah, I mean, the last thing Toronto wants to see is the Boston Bruins. I mean, they couldn't even get past Montreal this year. I mean, it's been more than just the Bruins that's been preventing them from moving forward.
Yeah, it gives me life. That's the only thing I have going for me, like the Sabres being the Sabres. But yeah, no, I definitely, I feel really good about the Bruins signings today. I don't think they overspent on anyone, and they didn't give too much term, which is really always the risk in free agency, is giving a guy like Okposo 7 years and just, at the end of it, you're scratching your head.
Yeah.
Okay, but Walt, thanks for having me on again.
Yeah, no problem, man. The Bruins made a lot of moves. We've been talking back and forth. I appreciate you keeping me up to date with all the Bruins moves this year. Hopefully you keep me up to date with some things that could be going on with some other former Sabres. We'll talk about that on another episode of the Alec Walt Show. But DJ, where can our listeners follow you on social media? Obviously, it's right there underneath your name. And listen to all your shows.
Yes, I mean, if you use any podcast streaming service, you can find Fantasy Hockey Picks and Bets, which is not going on right now. I am going to record tomorrow a Morning Skate podcast with the very fantasy relevant takes on all of the, Kraken, the acquisitions, trades, etc. Trying to go over some of the pieces. So if you're in dynasty leagues, etc., we're going to go over that. I'm going to tomorrow be hopefully getting ready to launch what is coming next for just myself. I'm going to be going over kind of, working on more video work, very 5-7 minute clips, trying to teach people about the game, trying to help learn a little bit more what to watch. I think that with hockey in general, if you're listening to this right now and you're like, I'm not a big hockey fan, I can't follow the puck too well or whatever, I'm hopefully going to help to introduce you to the game a little bit more, show you what to look for, show you how to watch, and gamble is going to obviously be a part of it. Why? I think that's one thing that people get into the game for with hockey is the gambling aspect, because the books do not price things correctly at all. If you listen to my show, you'll hear me mention players. You'll be like, this makes no sense. Everyone agrees that player scores a goal and we all take money home. So definitely check all that out. But keep listening here to the Alec Walt Show. He's got all the good stuff. He's way better at this than me. So I'm learning from him myself.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate the kind words, DJ. I appreciate you joining me, and best of luck to your Buffalo Sabres, getting the number 1 pick in next year's
Shane Wright
NHL draft.
Tank
yeah,
Wright.
That's about the only thing you can cheer for right now. So thank you again for joining me. The Bruins were very active today, so I'm looking forward to seeing them take the ice next season. That's it for this episode of the Alec Walt Show. I'm Alec Walt alongside DJ Mitchell. What do you think of the moves the Boston Bruins made in the first day of free agency? Feel free to comment that below. Also, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Down the Block Sports for more of my exclusive content. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and we'll see you very soon.